What the hell happened to Bitcoin overnight, and what the hell happened to the market? Because we did have a massive sell-off, not just in crypto and BTC, but also in the stock markets in general. So, that is the question that we're going to be answering today in this recording. So strap yourself in and we're going to get stuck into it. Now, if you watch one of my previous videos, I talked about this specific short setup, getting in on entries with the order block and with the VWAP overlapping. And this gave us one of those entry triggers for a short position on this daily candle back here, and also multiple entries as well on the lower time frame. So we're just going to zoom in and quickly take a look at that. So this is our anchored VWAP, right? And I'm placing that on the top of the on the top of the highest candle, basically, is the position that we want it to be in, right? And basically what we can see happen is we made our high here in the middle of July. And since then, we've made consistently lower highs. And it looked pretty good here for a little bit because it looked like, okay, we're in this falling wedge type pattern. And that's a bullish pattern, right? It came up, kind of hit target one, and then just like started rolling over and bleeding out. That's never a good sign to have a bullish pattern like this, right? Usually this needs to get moving quite quickly and come up to tag the target two and play out. So what we basically had was a falling wedge set up, and it failed to play out, resulting in quite a big sell-off, right? So a lot of people would have been positioning in here with stop losses below in this area here. And you can see once we took out those stops, the market got quite aggressive to the downside through here. And we had quite a large down candle. And then it was sort of helped to get through this area of support by some fake news that was released about SpaceX, which I might add is actually a private company. So they, even if they did sell a whole heap of Bitcoin, it wouldn't be released because they don't do earnings reports like Tesla does, for example, which is a public company, and they had their earnings report just recently. SpaceX doesn't do earnings report because they are not a public company, they're a private company. So I think, the whole thing about them selling $300 million of Bitcoin, and, for some reason that's bearish on the market, I think is a load of baloney, let's be honest. And that is definitely one of the main reasons. Now, I could be wrong, and maybe they did put out a statement saying that they, sold all this Bitcoin, but I actually haven't seen anyone come up with any real evidence that that's actually true. And it seems to be that statements from a few news Twitter accounts have come out and said that they haven't been able to find any actual evidence of that happening apart from the statement made by the Wall Street Journal. So in my opinion, those news outlets like the Wall Street Journal, etc., they are definitely for sale. And I was watching somebody possibly build a large position throughout this range through here, holding up the market with about 100 BTC order. And you could see it in the order book when you look at the DOM. And basically, they were holding up the market while, they probably had quite a large position which you can't see, which would have been a limit order, and people were basically moving and buying into that limit order, while they were holding it up on the other side of the market, right? While they're filling their shorts, and then they pull the 100 Bitcoin support, and then that yanks and basically the market gets pulled out from underneath it, and price starts to capitulate down, taking out all of the stop losses of all the people who had been buying throughout this area. Their stops were below here. You can see those got taken out and we dumped. Then this area here, those got taken out and we dumped. And it was almost $1 billion in liquidity was actually taken out of the market from open interest. So a lot of longs actually were taken out of the market on this dump, which makes a lot of sense, right? If you go to the downside, a lot of people are going to be taken out, and their longs are going to be stopped out and then liquidated once we start getting to, larger moves, right? And that's what really came in here. This is the big liquidation candle. Once we got below this area of support here, because a lot of people would be managing their positions for the liquidation to be underneath this level of support. And then we have that big 10%, $2,600 move to take out a lot of positions, right? So now what happens from here is probably the most important thing. And I think to touch on that, we probably need to talk about Evergrande, right? Which has filed for bankruptcy. Uh, and that's not really a great sign for the macro economy. We're going to have to wait to see if that has follow-on effects, throughout China. One thing that is China is in a fair bit of economic trouble at the moment, so we're going to have to see if they end up being a global dampener for macro in general, or if they start to pivot to being putting out a bit more stimulus and supporting their economy. So that's going to be quite interesting because we all know when these, like China's second biggest economy in the world, but when all these big economies start to put out a lot of stimulus packages to their economies and flood the market with capital again to stop these crashes from leaking into other sectors of the economy or into other countries. We all know what happens to Bitcoin. It usually finds support and starts to push back to the upside when liquidity starts to flow back into markets, right? And one thing, China's yuan is sort of struggling a little bit at the moment. And if they start to flood the market with fresh yuan, that's going to put a lot of selling pressure on the stability of the currency. And I believe that without the US printing as well, China are going to struggle to print substantial amounts to support their economy. So it's going to be very interesting to see, is this something that, the Fed is watching to see how the rest of the world is going? And if they move to, because this is obviously a systemic risk, if they start to move to potentially raise lower interest rates faster than what was initially projected, right? Especially with inflation coming down quite nicely as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see the macro position over the next couple of months, that's for sure. But I still have a feeling that we might have a strong Q4, just a little bit of a washout right now. And then, we start to usually pick back up around late September, October, and then move into Q4 where we see usually a lot of strength, right? So let's see how it ends up playing out. We'll be looking for that seasonality push again to the upside on stocks and also in crypto. And maybe this Evergrande stuff is sort of washed out by then, and China has decided to start to deploy a bit more capital into their markets to support a very struggling real estate sector, because it does seem to be that all these ghost cities that they've been building for such a long period of time could really start to come back to bite them in the ass. It's sort of like a house of cards, and it's finally starting to really fold on itself. One thing to take note as well is obviously this sector consumes a lot of the iron ore exports from Australia, which could see a bit of a downturn in our iron ore, which is one of the Australian market's largest exports. Right. Not a good sign considering the Australian housing market is sort of on an edge at the moment as well. So we will see how that ends up playing out. And, really what it comes down to is, will the US eventually start to stimulate a bit faster if things start to break? That is the question, right? Because other countries like Australia and, the European Union and the UK and China, they do kind of need the US to put stimulus out into the market for them to be able to stimulate properly. Otherwise, they just lose so much value against the dollar, which hurts their currency too much and their economy too much, right? But back to the charts, what are we looking for? I think the most obvious answer is, we roll over. I would. Right, obviously we've got FVGs in through here, which might come up and get hit, right, and then roll over. There's another big one up here, right, which eventually will get taken out. I don't want to see it run all the way straight back up here and then roll over, right? I would much prefer this to roll over, right? People who are trying to get in too early, buy the dip a little bit too early, they get stopped out. Then the next people get stopped out, and you sort of have that three dips after the initial sell off, right? And you get the bull div into the key order block. And then, you can get a reclaim of this level here. right? And then that pushes the upside. I would rather see some sort of price action like this, especially because we're coming into the weekend as well. Maybe Tuesday, we start to get a little bit more bullish price action and sort of flip this range and move back into an uptrend. And, you know, we end up getting something similar to the price action, which is in this area here, right? This is what I would like to see, something like this play out, right? With a nice bullish divergence into this key level here, which is a 25K. 300, I think, is probably the main area that we want to watch for. Usually after there's a big sweep of liquidity like this and all the bulls get taken out, usually that ends up meaning that we end up going, you know, we find some sort of a low and move back into the upside. I'd be surprised if this was a dump that, you know, continued, you know, to really push further and deeper and down into the 20K level. Obviously that can happen if, you know, things really go bad in the macro economy, but I think that most likely this is going to stay range bound and will stay above this 25K level. Potentially, you know, it does wick below. That would be an amazing entry if it took this liquidity level out. And that could give us a really nice entry on the reclaim of this 25,500 level, right? Which is from the tops back here, and then obviously the lows from here. So something like that, I think, would be a really nice entry. And then we would be looking for a run back to the previous year value area high, which is going to be this white line up here, right? And then who knows what happens for them. You know, we might chop around for a little bit, put in another distribution range and go back to the lows. That easily can happen. And we stay inside this reaccumulation range. Now, one thing I want to talk about here is the oversold state of the market. This is one of the most oversold states that the market has ever been in. I think potentially this is the lowest it's been. RSI on the 4-hour time frame came down to a 5.6. Yeah, I'm not sure when the last time it was lower than that. Let's go back and have a quick look here. We did come down at this point back here when we put in a macro reversal range, which took quite some time. That was almost a month and a half we were down there, and that ended up being quite a large inverse head and shoulders. And to be honest, we're in a similar stage of the market to this point here. So maybe we end up getting a big inverse head and shoulders, you know, on that 25K area, right? Let's see how it ends up playing out. But, you know, we could end up doing something like this, right? Let's see how that ends up playing out. But, you know, the main thing that I wanted to highlight here is that we are very, very oversold right now. The only time we've actually been deeper was when the market had the brutal sell-off to end the bear market, which was a 50% dump actually, was the only time we've actually been deeper on the RSI on the 4-hour. In my opinion, that was probably a little bit of a different stage of the market. This is more like, you know, the entry into the accumulation phase of the market. So similar to when FTX collapsed for this current cycle, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Now, if we go and have a look on the daily time frame, right, we can see that this is also one of the lowest periods ever that we have been on our RSI on the daily time frame. It's actually down to about 20. So the standard band area is around the 30 to the 70 range, and we're down at a 20, so quite low. This is definitely the lowest we've been since that dump off for the ultimate low in 2019. That marked the end of that bear market. It's definitely lower period than we've been in this current range. The last time we were down around these areas was I'm pretty sure this was was this the lunar this was the lunar collapse, or 3 arrows capital collapse, and then this was the Celsius collapse, or the other way around. I can't remember exactly, but it was one of those two really nasty collapses in the market, which ended up being a 40, pretty much 50% sell-off, right? So pretty nasty event to lead us into being that oversold. And we're at that same levels of oversold on the daily time frame. So we can see how that ended up leading to quite a nice 40% rally. And obviously this one here, we ended up going and getting that deeper sell off for the bullish divergence, right? So that is what we need to be looking out for, because that's the easy layup entry, something like that on the daily time frame, you know, down here, and get that bullish divergence through here. Something like that would make a lot of sense through here. So that's what we're going to be looking for anyway. Some type of a bullish divergence entry on the daily 4 hour, or just a sweep of this low through here, and then a nice pin bar Morningstar reversal. Those are the type of things that we're looking for, right? So same as back here when we had this big sell-off into the banking crisis, right? Daily time frame was oversold. We got the pin bar down here, Morningstar reversal, trying to set up, and then, you know, ended up pushing quite nicely, right? Same back here. The other time we were quite oversold. Weren't in the oversold area, but it ended up being quite deep. Right, then we got the Morningstar reversal off the key level and pushed out from there, right? So that's the type of price action that we're going to be looking for down here for the next entry. That's a nice, obvious daily setup, right? And so just to cover off, you know, why I was looking for, you know, shorts through here, I actually sold a bunch of my spot yesterday. I put up a few posts in, you know, our Facebook groups and stuff like that, talking about this daily low close here and how it had closed below, you know, the key level running through this range, but also how it had closed, you know, in areas through here that were pretty nice wicks and previously rejecting. And we can see here that, you know, the candle closed and there was acceptance right at the bottom of the candle. So there was no buying pressure here to push us back up that we had seen in previous, you know, pretty much 3 weeks, right? In this whole range through here, every time we came down into this area, the market would buy back up, buy back up, buy back up. And that seemed, those buyers that were holding us up through here seemed to have disappeared, right? And let us from that point there. It looked like someone who'd been buying up the market, holding it up, and then they pulled the rug. And that was a pretty clear signal, right? Especially after we have this sort of price action here, came back up and rejected from that level. Never really looks that great when you get, you know, this break of support and close below in the wick area of previous levels. So that was the reason why I sold some spot here. And I'll look to rebuy that. I think if, you know, we get a nice setup through this area here, that will allow me to take a long position looking for a move back up here, right? So Ethereum actually looking pretty nice here because we had the ETF get approved in the US overnight. So, you know, some crazy news where we had the Evergrande news and we had the fake news about SpaceX. And then, you know, we had some bullish news for Ethereum, right? So basically on the ETH, I want to see us hold this level above here, 16,500, right? And it would be good to reclaim this diagonal level through here as well. But we'll see how that ends up playing out. Not too excited about this price action. Really big liquidity event, but it needs to hold this low to stay bullish. But I'm going to be keeping my eye on this big falling wedge here on Ethereum BTC, because that could be a little bit of a signal if it can break this downtrend through here, that Ethereum might start to outperform a little bit, especially if it can move maybe back up to 0.078. It could give us a little bit of a run here back up to the highs as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Bitcoin does perform over the next few days. But I think these are the key levels through here. This this order block through here, this 25K level, and I'll be looking for some type of a bullish reversal indicator on our RSI to get some type of an entry, right? Maybe even a sweep of this wick low, right? A candle that looks something like this would be very nice. And then target 1 is this order block here, right? And if we can reclaim that, then I'll be looking for the highs up here at 31.5K. All right. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. The other main thing to really take a look at here is our charts on altcoins, right? So a lot of these are back at the lows, like Link back at the market lows, right? Back at the range lows, I should say. Solana as well, back in quite an interesting area. So, you know, if you are looking for these high quality altcoins to, build positions for the long term, make sure you have a look at some of the charts that you've been, waiting to buy into. Just, I'm going to be a bit careful here on Aave because I believe that, there's a massive liquidity pool below here and it has been consistently making lower highs through here, which is not usually a good sign. And it could be an indication that this is getting ready to put in a big spring. So I might wait to take a decent sized position here after a reclaim of the range lows, right? So that's the main thing I'm watching for on a lot of these altcoin setups. And, Doge is the same here, right? There's been so many lows, right? Defended equal lows through here. So these easily could get swept, right? And then just be looking from one side of the range to the other side of the range. And then, adding back when it comes back to the range low. And like I've said many times, a lot of these altcoins, they can continue to run sideways through here and, put in multiple springs even. I would like to see this hold because we have had quite a nice spring here already on Link. And that was a massive throwback and the range low held. So I would like to see, this build some sort of strength and push back up to the range highs eventually here. But don't get me wrong, this can continue to range through here until post-halving run when Bitcoin finally gets moving again. So something to think about. Anything you're buying now is definitely long-term holdings and don't be looking for any short-term games. Like, I'm buying in here on Link. This might break down through here, right? And do something like this, but then like a range reclaim of this level through here, especially sometime next year around the Bitcoin halving event, or, if the spot ETF gets approved for BlackRock or any other major ones, right? Altcoins eventually we're going to reclaim this level. So even if it does lose, I'll exit Link, but once we reclaim this $5 area, I will be adding pretty heavily because that really opens it up to move to range highs. Once it breaks out of range highs above $10, then it really opens up this upside and for us to go into markup phase again. So that's the main play I'm watching for these at the moment. Link is some great tech. Sort of got a little bit of inside info on this one that they're going to have some big releases coming later on in October, that they're going to start taking payment for the services. I'm not sure how that's going to link into the value of the token, but they might use some of that for staking, or they might use some staking rewards, or they might use some of that for token burning and stuff like that, which will help the price of the Link token actually perform really well. So that's something to think about here as we move, towards the back end of Q3, getting ready for Q4 in October. Starting to look at those longer term positions and not being scared off by, these minor fluctuations. It's a 15% move from the local highs on Bitcoin. Like, that's nothing. If you were trading in the bull markets with us in 2017, we were regularly having, 35, 40%, 45, 50% throwbacks, on some really damning, quite bad news as well, where everyone thought it was going to be the end of the world. Starlink selling $300 million of Bitcoin is not really that much of an issue. So I believe that the market was actually deliberately pushed down by some whales who had been building short positions for some time. And, to be honest, easily it could be, a player like BlackRock, for example, that wants to be building a large position ready for its spot ETF to get approved sometime early next year. Okay. But it makes sense to me. This is accumulation range. This is the reaccumulation range through here. Let's see if the 25K range low can hold. I think that's very important. If it doesn't, it opens up for 20K. But at the moment, I'm expecting it to stay within this 20K to 31.5K range. All right, guys, thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll see you all in the next episode.